Welcome to another Scott Tanner violin video. Thanks for joining me. This is a video all about playing Minuet No. 2 by Bach from Suzuki Book 1. Let's begin with teaching points. The first one is that we have quick string crossings. The second one is that this is our first time playing a triplet, or 3 notes in one bow stroke. And the last teaching point is that this is our first time playing a D sharp, which is a high third finger on A string. I generally like to give previews to my students, that is, a few measures to practice before we actually begin playing through the entire piece. The first one is found in measures 23 through 24. This is where we have the D sharp, and it sounds like this. Measure 15, and here's the triplet with A, B, and C. We need to space them each out as if we say pineapple. The other one is found in measure 23, F sharp, G, and A. Be sure to put your second finger very close to the first finger. The second preview is just in the second measure, and it's a quarter note followed by a hooked bow stroke on Gs. One of the challenging things about it is to make sure that we can play the Gs in tune. Here we have a second finger on E, G, and then it's followed by 2 Gs with a third finger on D string, and we hook the bow stroke for that. So combining the first 2 measures with an arpeggio and then an octave. G, then G, hooked bow stroke. The last preview I like to point out is in measure 29 and 30. Here we have 2 quarter notes that are slurred on a down bow bow stroke followed by an up bow stroke on the quarter note. And that would sound like this. Let's now talk about the left hand technique. In the first measure, we find independent fingerings for what's really known as a G major arpeggio. Let's begin with playing just the first 4 notes of measure 1. I'd then like to finish with the next 3 notes. In measure 14, I like to point out that you should use the 4th finger. And in general, where in the Suzuki book you have fingerings already printed, I would suggest using those fingerings. For the left-hand technique, let's discuss again measures 23 and 24, where we have the D sharp. This seems to be a challenging couple of measures for most students. We'll begin with the triplet, down bow. Leave the first finger on the fingerboard while you place your third finger at a higher position for D sharp. Half step to the 4th finger E. Come back to D sharp, open E, and then first finger F sharp. Here it is again. Stretch, half step, back to D sharp, open 1, and a little faster. Be mindful also that in the next measure, or measure 25, we have a D natural. So the scale will come down from G, then the D natural. 4th finger, so it's a good idea to leave fingers down whenever possible. Let's talk about the right hand technique for Minuet No. 2. It begins with the first measure, and because it's a G major arpeggio, we have to cross our strings pretty quickly. And I find the best way to do that is to keep your elbow pretty low. Here's an example of that. Keep your elbow low, and as you play across the strings, pull your elbow even lower. Here's another angle. See how my elbow is on the lower side? I don't want it up here, nor do I want to keep it up here. It's too difficult to get to the E string quickly. So let's begin with the lower elbow, almost like we're going to touch the side of our body. Some even like to go lower and to begin already as if your elbow is in an E string position with your hand up on the D. So that makes it a lot easier to get across the strings fairly quickly. And then the whole arm can commit to the D string. Then drop and begin again. Anytime you play on the E string, you want to drop your elbow, keeping it low, close to your ribs. As I had mentioned a little bit before, measure 2 is a full bow on the quarter note, and divide your bow into half for the hooked bow stroke. That would sound like this. And if you need to practice that without your G's, just do that with an E and a D. I also like to point out that bow distribution is a really big part of playing the minuets or any other piece. When you have quarter notes, use a full bow. When you have eighth notes, use a little bit less bow, either at the tip or at the frog, depending upon where you're at. Here's an example with measure 5, 6, and 7. Here's another example with measure 14 and 15. And we find that again in measure 37 and 38. The last place I want to point out bow distribution would be in measure 25, 26, and 27. Watch how I play with a long bow on the quarter notes and a shorter bow stroke for the eighth notes. When you come to the D in measure 28, it's a good idea to stop the bow and then continue in measure 29 at the tip, because it's a piano dynamic and we're already at the tip. It's a good place to stay. Here's what that would look like. Stop and continue. And there's your slurs. One more time. Stop and then continue. The final thing I'd like to tell you about is that in measure 32, there's a dotted half note A. It doesn't say to crescendo, but I seem to really like the crescendo. It kind of seems to lead nicely into the forte that follows. The last idea to remember is simply that there are repeats in this piece for both the first half and the second half. If you're ready, let's begin with playing the practice tempo of Minuet No. 2 with the metronome set to 70 to equal the quarter note. If you need more work on this minuet at this practice tempo, I'd encourage you to go to the practice tempo video repeated 5 times. Let's continue with the performance tempo, with the metronome set to 105 equals the quarter note. If you're looking for a video where you can repeat this 5 times in a row at a performance tempo, just go to the next video in this series. Otherwise, let's move on to minuet number 3. I hope to see you in the next video real soon, and in the meantime, strings out.